So, hi. Hi, Simone. Welcome.
Well, good morning, Bev. Great to chat with you.
Yeah, so I'll just tell the world who I am. I'm Bev Ryan. I work with authors as a book coach and a publisher, so I help people start their books, and I also help them publish their books through editing, graphic design, that sort of thing. I've recently finished my own book, Smart Women Publish, which I'm very excited to be launching this week and to the world.
And congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's pretty exciting stuff. And I'm here today to talk with Simone. So I've decided to do this kind of author webinar chat on a fairly regular basis now, because there's much more to being an author than just producing a book. Kind of that's one part of the journey. Then the next part starts. So I've invited Simone to join me. So we've got Simone de Haas online, and Simone is, I've got to read this off the text, sorry.
That's fine.
Simone is a multi-award-winning professional theatre director, producer and performer. She's also the immediate past president, Queensland Northern Territory chapter of Professional Speakers Australia. And she works with authors, experts who speak, CEOs and entrepreneurs. So there's sort of a lot of things happening in that world of yours. So maybe start with the author part. So how do you actually work with authors or experts who speak?
Okay, so the thing with experts who speak and they've just written a book, it might be a business book, it might be their story around resilience or PTSD, whatever their subject matter is. Mm-hmm. And often it's what I find is that authors like, oh, thank God, I've done the book. It's out in the world. I can sit back now and the book will sell itself and people are going to be beating a path to my door, wanting copies of it. Unfortunately, that rarely happens, because unless you give your book a voice, like you need to be the spokesperson for your book. Mm. You need to actually speak up for it. You need to create media interest, PR. You need to market your message. Mm. And so a lot of authors think, oh, well, I don't know how to do that. I'm not a speaker. I'm a writer and I don't know how to share that message, which is why when we started to talk about this particular webinar, I thought, well, what a great idea to help authors find not only the way that they can talk about the book, but to find their own voice as an author. Because generally when they've written a book, they've found the voice of the book in terms of like, this is what my message is, this is what I stand for, this is my background. So the book already has a voice. So how do they articulate that message in a way that's still congruent, but also shares a little of themselves and their personality? So what I do is actually help authors, or maybe it's people who want to step into speaking more. And so I help them actually unpack, well, what are the key messages in the book that you would like to share from whatever your platform is. It might be a bookshop signing. It could be some kind of a launch event, where you need to speak about the book. Or it could be a panel where you're an expert in your area and you've been asked to come and speak about your subject matter expertise. So I help people who have written the work to actually then develop that more by giving it a different kind of voice.
Right, so people can't, if someone's invited to speak because they're an author, they really, people are expecting more of them than just for them to speak up and just say what's in the book, aren't they?
Yes, because I can pick up the book and I can read the back cover, which pretty much will tell me that.
Yeah. So let's use some examples. We were chatting earlier about the book that you've put together, which you might like to explain the structure of it and the content. So it was interesting how from that you can still develop a higher message, which then could become a speech or a presentation.
Yes, absolutely. So the book I wrote was in 2015. I launched that on the Unsuspecting World. It's called Everyday Presence, The Art of Being Visible. And essentially it was a book of inspiration. So it was every second page was a picture, photos that I've taken myself. I'm a mad keen amateur photographer, and everywhere I go, I'm like, I just wander around with my phone or my camera. I'm always taking photos. And so I have a knack for putting the photo with the right words. And so the whole book developed that way. I wanted to focus on what was my core message, and then what were the images that supported that message. And then I added in quotes about presence, what it means to be present, what it means to be in the moment, as well as the 7 scripts that help people on a day-to-day basis to be present. And so that book actually, it came out of the work that I've done as a theatre director, but it also has evolved further now. And in fact, I'm looking at editing that this year and adding more content into it and updating it, because I've changed a lot since I wrote that. And so the concept of presence now is a lot more mainstream than it probably was when I first wrote the book.
Definitely. So then if you were asked to speak, so you've launched that book and you're asked to speak and the audience is expecting a speech that sort of reflects the book, what would the actual speech be?
So the speech would be, why is it important to be present?
Yeah.
So, when we have presence, we become visible to the world. And as business owners, and if you want your book to be visible, you need to be very present with your audience when you're speaking about it, for instance. You can't be off in your head and thinking, oh, will they like me? There's so many elements, whether that is actually quite vital to us. But if I'm speaking about presence, for me, it would be around the art of being present, what that looks like. And I use it in my keynotes and my talks all the time. I talk about being present. And now I call it 360-degree presence, because presence is an ever-evolving and a circular concept, if you like. Like, we're not just present forward-facing. So the rewrite is incorporating this new knowledge and wisdom that I have. So when I'm speaking about it, I would speak about why it's important, how we can be more present. So I would always give an audience at least one little takeaway, something actionable that they can do, so that they've come to listen to me speak, and it might have been about the book, but they walk away going, oh my God, that's so easy for me to do. I'm going to actually take action on it. I'm going to try that out in my own life. And I think that's the missing piece, I think, for a lot of authors. They don't give their audience a call to action.
Yeah, so most of the people I work with as authors would be very similar to the clients you work with as speakers. My clients are non-fiction authors. Usually most likely they're business owners or entrepreneurs or professionals. And so they're writing a book because they have a message that they want to give to the world. So I guess in order to figure out what that message is, they've got to dig fairly deep and know who the audience is and why would their audience even want to read the book. So is it the same process with the speech then?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of similarities between being an author who then wants to speak about the book and being a speaker with a message. You essentially start from this, well, I think you start from the same place. Like, what is the core message? What is it that I want to share? And as you say, the audience are essential. You need to know who you're writing for, and if I'm creating a keynote, I need to know, who do I want in that audience? So who is this message that I'm writing about for? So you absolutely need to get really clear on who's your audience, who's your target audience for this particular message. And it doesn't mean that you have to stick with just one. You might have a couple of different target audiences. And that's perfectly okay. And you might write one version of the book for one target audience and a slightly different version of the book for a different audience.
I'm actually interesting you said that. My book is called Smart Women Published, and the subtitle is Write the Book That Elevates You and Your Business. So it's quite specifically for women in business. But my editor pointed out they've actually, the content doesn't really focus on women. It's fantastic content. You could be writing the same content for a male audience as well. So, I could theoretically, and I may do that some stage, just use very similar content, but just change the title, change the packaging or whatever.
So it could become Smart People Publish, and so then it's across a much broader audience, because as you say, everybody's got that message that they want to share. And so absolutely, you could rebrand the book slightly to work with a slightly different audience.
Oh, just keep bumping the table there. It's not your camera, it's me. So I know when, in the work I do, I think and I know this is true of everybody. We all do what we do because there's a much deeper reason for it. And it's, I work with professionals, but publishing for me is a way for people to not just get their message out, but in the process of it, they have to discover a lot about themselves. And, I went through something very similar when I started my first magazine. I mean, I didn't know how to self-publish, so I had to find out how to do it. And I grew up, a very quiet kid on a farm, fair bit of isolation. So I'm not lacking confidence, but I mean, just having sort of standing on my feet, talking in groups, that sort of thing, it was a bit daunting to start with. But what motivates me, I guess, to do what I do is just helping other people go through that same sort of journey. And that's pretty true of most of us, isn't it? We end up doing something to help people who we understand.
I think so. We all, I feel, most of us have this calling to create change, like to have an impact, or to make a difference. The number of times when I'm running workshops, particularly for women in organizations where, they don't feel like they might have much in the way of a career trajectory, but maybe they're in a regional area or rural area and there's not a lot of opportunities there. And, so often they say, well, I just want to be able to make a difference. And so I think for everyone, if we can find what it is that we're here for, then we share that. That's the difference we make. It's about stepping into what we're here for, how we can identify what I actually call your iconic brilliance. That's part of my program. So when you identify that, then you start to become, I think, more connected to the message that only you are here to share. Because we all have very different messages. We might have very similar experiences, but it's filtered through our own lives. So, I'll have a very different take on something, even though I might have the exact same experience as another theatre director. Because of what I've gone through, I'll have a very different perception of it. And I think that's why we just love books, because we're looking at information, whether it's a business book or whether it's a work of fiction, we're being gifted the opportunity to look at the world with very different eyes through the perspectives of these authors.
Definitely. Actually, when I was researching my book, I came up with a couple of interesting things, as you do when you're writing a book. And that's one of my things about writing a book. And I suppose writing speeches is probably the mini version of it, but you have to research things, you have to learn, you have to sort of accumulate knowledge and toss it around and come up with your spin on things. But I found this note this morning, actually, and it's interesting because I think it probably sits very deeply with what you and I both do. So according to Dove, the company Dove that markets to women, 2016 Global Beauty and Confidence Report surveyed more than 10,000 women and girls aged from 10 to 64 across 13 countries. And part of their results was that only 1 in 5 women felt they had high self-esteem. 1 in 5 is surprisingly low. Yeah. So, I think that motivates a lot of us because we kind of identify with that, most of us ourselves anyway, because we're probably one of the 4 in the 5. And so do you find that in the work you do with authors or anybody, or women in particular, that's part of what you're doing, helping them with?
Oh, absolutely. That's because writing is a very, I do, write myself, and I've got like 3 books on the go at the moment, and I pick and choose which one wants to have something added to it. But the writing process has to be, by its nature, I think it's very personal, and it's quite introverted in many ways. You can't, unless you're collaborating on a book, which would be a little different process. So the writing of it is it's very personal, it's very introverted, and so when you have to then share about the book, it's like there is such an element of judgment that we have about what we do. And that can be anything. This is not exclusive to writing by any means. I see it all the time with actors who, you know, they may be brilliant. They don't see that they're brilliant, and they're constantly needing that affirmation or validation that they're doing a good job. You know, I've done that myself. You know, I'm a reasonably confident woman, but it's taken me my lifetime to now to continue to develop that confidence and be who I am, and actually not care about what other people think of me.
Yeah.
And I think when we step from that author space to the speaking space, that's the bit that gets in the way, that what we think other people are going to think of us. Yeah, and I think the same is true if you took it the other way. If you're stepping from the speaker space into the writing space, suddenly you're thinking, oh, what if I can't write? What will people think of me? Like, oh, I'll lose all my credibility as a speaker because I can't write for peanuts, you know.
Yeah.
So get a ghostwriter, if that's really the case.
Yeah, I spoke, I did a short presentation about publishing to a professional group one day, and only a couple of people in the group had actually published. And when I was asked, you know, I was talking about the reasons why we hold ourselves back from publishing or speaking. Most of them, I asked, is it fear of what your peers will think of the quality of your work? And they all put their hands up. Yeah. So that is a big deal. So you know, if somebody's a natural writer, then they're going to fear that when they speak. And as you said, vice versa, because we sort of regard authorship authorship as a kind of an academic process, and quite revered. And if we're not good at it, it's like we'll be judged really badly.
I think that's got more to do with our education system, perhaps, than through creativity. You know, the way I write is very, it's kind of the way I think. It's in very short sentences, and I don't know what, you know, it would never pass academic writing by any standard. But I've been a lecturer at QUT in acting, and I had to assess their writing, which I found like weird, because it's like, oh, okay, so now I've got to pay attention to their grammar and their punctuation and heaven knows what else.
Yes.
So it was a very interesting process looking at writing from a purely academic point of view. But that piece about, what will my peers think about my writing? All I can say to people who are struggling with that is that you can only ever write in your own voice. And, you know, I think for anyone who's contemplating writing a book, it's got, you know, I've got to be able to open that book, and I've got to be able to hear your voice in my head, and to be able to see you, like to get a sense of who you are, what your persona, if you like. And I think when we try to write to formula, or we try to write to please others, we lose a little bit of that voice. And the same is true for then speaking about the book. You must speak about the book. You need to be congruent, is probably what I'm saying. Yeah. You know, everything needs to align, needs to be matched. You know, your book has a particular energy, and so when you speak about the book, you want to have that same energy as well. For instance, I was doing an author interview a little while back, and the author was still going through some of the healing process about what they had written about in the book. And as a result of that, it hadn't really come to, they hadn't really resolved all of the issues, shall we say, that they wrote about. And as a result, when I was trying to interview them, they were cagey about what they had written about. Like, they wouldn't expand. I would ask a leading question and they wouldn't expand on it, and we ended up kind of like going around in circles. And so for the audience, it was a very unsatisfactory interview, because it was obvious to the audience that they were withholding, that they weren't willing to share. And, you know, like, people want to know, why did you write the book? Why? They want to know why it's important to you, but they also then want to know, why should we care about it? Like, why it's important for us? And, you know, so if you withhold yourself, and if you're not congruent with who you are and the voice of your book, your audiences are going to pick up on that, and they're not going to come and buy your book, and they won't come to your book signing, because they go, well, you're not being honest with me, you're not being real, you're not authentic, and essentially you're putting up a facade, a mask, you know, and people don't buy from people who aren't real.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not a member of PSA or anything like that, but I know there's fabulous speakers, but sometimes in my life I've been to presentations where the speaker feels like they're a different person on stage and off stage. They kind of go into performance mode on stage, which, you know, I'm not sure whether that's a thing, like it was the way you did it in the past or whether that's still the way people do it now. But I think that's exactly what you're saying. You've got to be the same person when you're the author speaking about why you wrote your book, and if you're a business owner, you've got to be that same kind of person, that style of person in your business as well. So
absolutely, because people see through the bullshit. You know, they kind of go, well, you say this, but you do that. And, you know, those two just don't kind of really align for me. And, you know, in terms of the way people present, I think it's very much like, you know, a little of column A and a little column B. The way that I work with people who want to step into speaking, because I do work a lot with aspiring speakers as well, not just people who've written a book but want to speak, but people who have a message that they want to share. And, you know, for me, it's very much about that congruency. Like you can't create the kind of visibility you want if you're not congruent. It's like the very first step is to actually so that when people meet you, they go, oh my God, you're exactly as I expected. You know, it's that kind of thing. Or, you know, that your passion for your subject comes through. You know, people say that to me all the time. Oh my God, you're so passionate about what you do. Well, yeah, I wouldn't do it if it wasn't.
That's right.
But, you know, like to me, that's a no-brainer, but it's not necessarily true for everyone, of course. So I'm very fortunate that I get to follow my passion. I do. But I think it's essential.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's so many lovely authors talking about authenticity and all sorts of excellent things that are helping people get rid of that fear and realise that it is actually okay to be who they are and to show kind of some of the reality of their life behind the like, for example, behind my screen here. I've got a normal office.
But that's great, isn't it? But it's something that helps. But you know, that's part of the branding, and you've got to be on brand. You know, like for me, it's the same as with my backdrop. It's all about, you know, the colours and being on brand and helping people to kind of recognise you in that public space as well. You know, you're the author of whatever that might be. You know, smart women publish, and you know, if you hadn't published any books, it would be like a little bit. What? She's talking about smart women publish, but she hasn't actually published anything. It's like, what? I have published. So you're absolutely obliged to publish, aren't you?
I've published lots of magazines and I've published other people's books. So, But yes, definitely my turn to step up and do it.
That's very exciting.
No, it's great. And I'm now having to do all the things that you help people with. So when authors are asked to speak, if they're asked to do a presentation, they've got control over what they present to the world. One of my authors, she's just going through media interviews, and her book is officially launched next Thursday night, in Melbourne. So it's a fantastic story. It's her memoir, and she now runs a business in Melbourne. But she was asked to speak on Channel 10 about 2 weeks ago, and that's a whole different kettle of fish, isn't it? Because especially these panel shows, there were 3 or 4 people on the couch with her. Questions were coming from and the time spent, like, it was literally 2 or 3 minutes. So do you help people sort of deal with the preparation for that sort of thing as much as you can prepare?
Yeah, absolutely, because you need to be very succinct. Media loves soundbites, so you need to give them like a little piece, like a really meaty piece in the middle. That's a soundbite. So like if I'm doing a presentation, you know, my soundbite will be like the 2 words I put on a PowerPoint that encourage people. Go, oh my God, I love that, and they take a photo of it, and so they share me in that way. So when you're speaking to media or you're doing a radio interview, if you can share the radio interview, often you have a little bit more time, so you can expand on things a bit more. But in a panel situation, as you say, where you're being thrown questions, they'll generally let you know what kind of questions they're going to ask. So you need to prepare an answer that speaks to what they've asked. And make it really clear, no extraneous, like no exposition, like literally you jump in with the information that they want, because that keeps it dynamic, it keeps it moving. there's nothing worse than like a beat while you think about it. Like that's bad TV, and if it's live, they can't edit that out.
I think Fiore, her name is Fiore Giovanni, so she'll probably start popping up a bit more often. But they did ask her to send questions. No, they sent her. I guess the producer sent her some questions. So she had sort of prepared some responses to those questions. But the people sitting on the couch didn't ask those questions.
No.
But,
and they almost never do. Yeah. They read them, they go, oh, that's interesting, and then they ask their own.
Yeah.
So you've got to, I suppose you've got to kind of be alert, and this is where your intuition is brilliant, because it can help you kind of tap into, okay, so what are the kinds of questions I have been asked in the past? These might be the things that I'd like them to ask me, but what are the kinds of things I have been asked in the past that I think that they're probably going to go down that road? So, and they're very rarely a traditional question, like they're almost always a leading question to get more information, and because it's like, it's the whole, bad news sells. Even if you're doing a book launch, which is good news, it's still about the struggle and the challenge that they would more likely to ask about.
Fiore grew up in Eritrea, which is at war with Ethiopia. So, I mean, her story is huge. She did well to kind of get a few bites out there in the conversation, and so she found it quite nerve-wracking because of that. And I think that's going back to being the voice of your book. It's really important if you're going into a situation like that. I'd imagine that you at least know the few things you need to say, and get them in there.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you can use the politician's trick. Here, which is you go in with your agenda, you know what you want to say, and no matter what they ask you, you find a way to put that in there. And you just go back to it. It's a bit like a broken record. But if you do have I have a wonderful author friend who writes about the future of education, not only in Australia, but he's a futurist and all over the world. And I interviewed him for his latest book launch, in fact. And he was fabulous because he really understood, we worked out what it was we wanted to share, and so that he could then speak at length about particular things. And I didn't need to ask him that many questions. I just let him talk about his expertise, because he is expert in this area. And so, I think for all of us, no matter as a speaker or author, we need to understand, well, what are the three key messages or one key message that I want to share? And every book is going to have those key messages in it. Definitely. So, what are some of those key things that you want to share with the audience? And just as long as you've got them front of mind, the rest might be filled in with a story or, another part of, why you wrote the book, what was the experience that led you to do that. So, our stories are essential as well as authors, not just the story of the book itself, but the stories of our lives that help kind of inform the content.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess my book's a good example of Smart Women Published. It's aimed at business women. So, but if I spoke to a business group, I know that not every person in that audience is going to want to publish a book. So I would therefore speak about sort of the higher level message, which is really about finding a voice, whether that looks like a book or public speaking or running webinars or whatever, but just finding the confidence to be more visible and vocal and just value what you've got to contribute to the world. So,
and I think for every business person, even just writing an article or sharing a post, there's authorship in that.
Oh, definitely.
And that needs to be, again, congruent with your voice as a business person. So, not sharing, puppy videos. Or you can do that, of course, on your personal stuff, but as a business owner, making sure that you're sharing content that is aligned with your voice is also really, really helpful.
And not being afraid to have an opinion.
Well, yes, absolutely.
One of the terms I came up with, self-authorship, came up in my research for my book, and I thought, and to me that's really exactly what's happening through gathering information and publishing and writing a book. You're kind of forced into self-authorship, which is really about determining what your own beliefs and values are, so that you make decisions based on your internal system rather than looking externally for validation or ideas. So I think that's a lovely connection there between book authorship and self-authorship. So that might be a good speaking topic for me.
I love it. I love that
Okay.
self-authorship for sure.
Yeah, that's a great term. All right. Well, was there anything else you wanted to add on that topic? And I know we talked a little bit about, we talked about your book. So just to round it off, if you could tell us, because my clients are authors or budding authors, so just a sort of a quick synopsis of what services you offer to authors, or how can you help authors?
Okay, so I work one-on-one, so I'm a business coach, and so that's one of my hats that I wear. Right. I also do a lot with people around the delivery of the speech, so not the writing of the speech, because again, I feel that people need to have that ownership of their own authorship.
Right.
And so it needs to be in their voice. But what I do is that I work with authors to help them craft, say, if they want to create a keynote from their book and then start to go onto the speaking circuit with that particular topic, then I help people craft it from that perspective when they've already got the established outline, if you like. And I work a lot with speakers who have just written a new book and they're creating a new keynote out of it. So, so for authors who actually want to actually be able to talk about their book, I do very similar service and helping them to actually, I suppose, give the book a voice in terms of like, how do you speak about it? What are the key messages that you want to share? Where is your audience? You know, like where are you? What's your platform? In other words, where are you best placed to actually be able to share your message? Because a lot of people don't necessarily know like, where's the best place to actually talk about their book.
Yes.
Once, you know, particularly for nonfiction, it might be, okay, well, have you looked at these groups? Or, you know, maybe you do work with a particular type of association. You know, for me, obviously I do a lot with professional speakers, and so it makes sense that I do some work within the professional speakers associations around the world. So that's a natural target market for me. So I work with authors, help them actually identify their a good target market audience for their speaking in addition to the book.
Definitely. Okay. And do you do that one-on-one plus groups? Do you run workshops or groups, or just?
I do workshops, which are general public workshops, and I'll be having one come up. The next one is not until late May, and that is my Iconic Brilliance workshop. So I'll be running that as a masterclass. So that's about finding and owning your voice and your brilliance, and whether that's through the pages of your book or through speaking a brand new speaking topic. That's something I'll be running. Awesome. But I also do a lot of work. The majority of my work is one-on-one. I don't do group coaching per se.
Yeah, cool. I think I should be in your masterclass in May.
I'll let you know about it.
Thank you. So just to finish off, how do people find you?
Oh, they can find me, they can email me, Simone, that's SIMONE, at simonedehas.com. My surname is DEHAAS.com. So Simone at simonedehas.com is my email, or you can call me on mobile to set up a chat, and that's 0412 674 535.
Excellent. I'll drop those details in when I make this public, but that's awesome.
That would be fabulous. Thank you.
So just to finish off, my name is Bev Ryan. My business is Bev Ryan Publishing, and my book is Smart Women Publish. So thanks, Simone, so much.
My absolute pleasure, and all the best for the launch of your book this week.
Thank you. Thank you very much.